I did have a near-death experience. I'm 67 when I was 22, so many years ago, and it really sent me on a spiritual journey. And now I came back from that with some healing abilities, but it was back in the 1970s, and it wasn't like you look online. Well, you didn't look online for anything back then, or, the information about near-death experiences was not all over the place. Now there's even TV shows about it. It's like, so I didn't really know what to make of it. One thing I did notice right away, I started meeting a lot of people that had near-death experiences and a lot of spiritual teachers, just what seemed like randomly, but it obviously wasn't. I also had my hands started to become very warm when I touched anyone, even for a moment. And, now it's like you'd think right away, oh, healing abilities, but I didn't even think of that back then. And so I started learning from these teachers and learned that energy can be used for healing. And then I developed those skills to work in different ways with people and, do healing over long distance. And it really changed my life in a good way. It's hard living this kind of life, when you're dedicated to something that's not about making money and, necessarily succeeding in the world. So I was living in Colorado in the U.S., and my family was from the Northeast and just north of New York City. I had come back east to visit my parents, which I would do once in a while, and my roommate in Colorado was a friend of mine from high school, so his parents lived in the same area. We drove back, I forget, it's like 2,000-mile drive, but we did it pretty much straight through. So we got there, went to each of our family's houses and rested for a while, and we heard about a party that a friend from high school was having. So we went to the party. There was drinking and pot and other things that I don't do anymore these days. But so it was, kind of a cute story, but the end result was I was damaged physically. But the young lady having the party I thought was kind of cute. So I was kind of pretending to be a little more drunk than I thought I really was. And I asked my friend to drive me back to my parents' house, and I would go get the car the next day so I could, talk to this young lady who was a little too busy at her party, and it was so loud and everything. Almost all the way back to my parents' house, I realized my sister needed the car the next day. And I asked my friend to drive me back. He protested because, I told him I was too high to drive. And I explained to him that I was overacting that part, or I thought I was. And so I went back to the party. I went in to tell the young lady that I was taking my car, and I still have a vision of walking towards a door to leave the party. And it was a lot of people, music, but even the image in my mind is, people were a little hazy, and, sometimes when you drink, the colors get a little brighter, and it was like that. And I shouldn't have driven. I know that now, but back then I was young and foolish, let's say. So I don't remember getting in the car or anything else about driving until I was out of my body, in the white light, all around me, white light, looking down. The car was smashed beyond what you could imagine someone to survive in. It was, really smashed. And my body was leaning against a tree, like sitting on the ground, my legs out like this, and a police officer was crouching over me. And my head was cracked open, which part of it was all that seemed totally fine. Like everything just seemed really fine. It felt so loving, warm, and a certain knowing that everything is just how it's supposed to be. So there was all this white light around me. Behind me there was a big circle of white. And then within that there was a person, but it was just like a total white. Off that there was another shade of white kind of radiating off that. And again, it just felt, people ask me questions, did you have a body? I don't know, but it felt like I had a body because it felt so nice. It just like kind of knowing everything and, getting glimpses into some dramas in my life, and it's like, oh, I understand why. And even my car crash, you understood everything. Then the being from behind me said, you have to go back. Your father wants you to stay. As soon as the being said that, I knew the father was God, not my physical father. In the spirit of everything is okay and everything's good, I went back into my body. I came to 3 days later in the hospital. My understanding of all this really happened, as I mentioned, part of what happened was I just started meeting people that knew about this stuff. And, I mentioned it to a few people here and there, but it's not like you'd say it and people go, oh, a near-death experience. They kind of look at you like you're a little, a little crazy or something. But one thing that happened that I didn't even realize, I knew it happened, but I didn't realize how cool it was because I went back to Colorado for a while, then I moved back to New York, and in Westchester, in Tarrytown, New York I was living, and someone knocked on my door. I opened the door, there was this beautiful woman there, and she said to me, my sister is a good friend of yours from Colorado, and she told me some cool things about you. And it ended up, that was one of the people I mentioned my near-death experience to. And this woman said she knew someone who knew about this stuff and, taught people about what happens after we die. And she introduced me to him. And he was a Sufi sheikh, which is, Sufism is part of the Islamic religion. And so as soon as she mentioned this guy, I need to meet this guy. I need to hear what he has to say. So I followed up on that, and I ended up studying with him for a long time, about 10 years. When he started to talk to me about 3 different things that just like, when you get an aha moment. So the first thing he talked about was Mary and how much Mary loved God and how open she was to the Christ energy coming in. And I said, whoa, that was like my feeling, that love coming in. And then he talked about Jesus. And as soon as he said that, I knew that being behind me was Jesus. And then he talked about the ocean of divine love and benevolence. And I knew that white light around me, that's what it described. And even now I say that, I kind of want to close my eyes and float away in that ocean of light, There was white all around me and just a big white circle. Again, you're using words that are used nowadays. And all that it was, like it was white here, but then there was, and someone said, so you could see behind you. And I thought, I didn't even think of that. I just knew it wasn't really seeing, it was more like being a part of it. One of the cool things for me, I do like to do this because it reminds me of it. And when I think of it, I connect into that energy. And it just, I start to feel, like I said, even now, I'm starting to connect. I want to just close my eyes and, float away into that. And so what I did of studying with these different people was learn how to use that energy to help other people and heal them, which is, again, it's a few years ago. Even for years, I didn't really talk to people about it. And I was teaching a class at the University of Bridgeport in Bridgeport, Connecticut, on mindfulness, breathing, and meditation. And after the class, a woman said to me, she was teaching a class on death and dying. And, I'd heard of near-death experience before, and so I was using that. And I said, I had a near-death experience. She got so excited and said, you need to come talk to my class. And then I posted something on Facebook, and I was so surprised how many people were interested. I didn't realize it had become a thing. But my process has always been more about spiritual growth and becoming a better person. And I just started learning from people how to channel this healing energy and that loving, warm, knowing. Again, the billion times. It's like infinite, because when you connect into it, it's like all the way in every direction. It's not, there's no way to, we feel in our heart, but then you go, whoosh, and it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing. There was something about it that was almost timeless. That's one of the questions people ask me. It didn't seem, then when I start to try to connect, then it's like, oh, it's kind of floating and there's no time, it didn't seem like a very long time. Like some people say, oh, it seemed like 3 years or whatever. I didn't experience that. Looking back, there were some clues that happened that were, pushing me in this direction. It was just hard to deny it because I would meet people like that woman showing up at my door. I had this phenomenal experience, and then I went back to Colorado for a little while and then came back to New York, and I had a job in construction, so I was going to work, going home, drinking beers kind of thing, and, going to the bar or whatever. And, I had that experience, but I didn't know what to make of it. And then this woman showed up and I met this guy, and he, when he talked, it was just like, I need to be around this person. And I did for about 10 years. I wasn't around him for all the 10 years. So some of it was just studying on my own from things he taught me or books and things like that. But I don't know. It just, it just was part of my makeup. I don't know. I don't know how to really answer that, except I just had to. I had to find out. In the beginning, it was studying what happened after we die, because even, in the beginning, around that time, people started using the phrase near-death experience, but I didn't really hear of it. So there's like the Tibetan Book of the Dead we read. There was this guy, E.J. Gold, who was kind of a character, a Sufi, who wrote kind of these interesting books, but he wrote a book about death that we used. And so I don't know. Even now, I want to know more. There's just something in me. It's in my heart. It's in my gut that's just pulling me in that direction. In my mind, I didn't really know what to make of it. So, I knew the one thing that was undeniable, my hands would become warm and sometimes hot when I would touch people, even going to shake hands or, just touch someone like that. And one time I was with a friend and he twisted his ankle, and I just instinctually reached out to try to help, put my hands on it. And he said, wow, it started to feel better right away. And again, it wasn't healing abilities, because I didn't even know those words, but so I kind of stumbled across it, and meeting people. The Sufi sheikh would say I'm a sensitive, which I knew, for a man to hear that isn't always a compliment, but I knew it was from him, because when that woman first came to see me, she actually gave me one of these guy's books, and his teacher called him a sensitive. So I knew he was talking about being sensitive to spiritual information and, knowing things and all that. It was gradual in a time where people were not talking about this stuff. That's what, and eventually. So when I taught that class at the University of Bridgeport, it was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So there was, from 1976 to, let's say, 2016, so many years before it was like, oh, this is a thing, And I mean, I studied different kinds of healing since then, but something about that time in that class and everything really got me to own what was going on in a way where I didn't have to pretend I didn't know, or, it was just okay. It just, when, people accept it more, and it's not like I would mention it to someone and they would look at it like I'm crazy. They start to look at it like, wow, that's a great thing. In a funny, cute way again. There was Star Trek that I liked when I was young, and there was one of the episodes where this woman was put together with Captain Kirk, I don't know, one or two of the other people in it, and she had to learn, because she was born with healing abilities, but she was afraid to do it because when she would heal people, then she would get sick for a little while. And this episode was about her learning to put her needs aside and heal. And it was funny because I had to learn to kind of not do that, because I don't want to be getting sick when I heal people. And sometimes it is, you take stuff on from other people and you have to do stuff to clear that. But as much as possible, you want to kind of surrender to God or the source or the light, to the universe, that does the healing, as opposed to me personally. In one way, you have to be really, you got to really discipline your ego, because it takes a lot of strength to do that. And it is not just surrendering and oh la-di-da, it's surrendering and being very strong in your surrender. So you get the ego to do that, and then you stay on track with that. So it's always, what's for the highest good, what is, there's the different saints that come in sometimes, and, like, what is their opinion? Part of what I learned is like in the way in my near-death, and recently I had a whole new level of understanding about this, of that there is a knowing there, but our mind comes in and wants to put words and images on it, and that comes from what we've learned in our mind. So it is like you get this, it is more of a feeling of knowing, and then you hold your mind back. And sometimes you don't really get to know, and you don't get to know what it's going to look like, or what the image or what the words are, and you just hold this thing of loving and acceptance. And within there is the acceptance, this person is good. I mean, everyone has this good thing in them, and then, the acceptance is that, it is kind of, well, you want them to heal, but it is an acceptance of what their process is. It is a knowing, but it's kind of a knowing in, like, here, as opposed to here. So it's like acceptance and knowing, like, I guess would be the best way to describe it. One of the cool things that happened with him, he was teaching this workshop, it's in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, on sacred geometry. And the other people in the class had studied this for a while, and I didn't. And, I asked him about being in class. He said, you're not really going to understand what it is, because these are more advanced students. And I told him I still want to be there. I would help him out, like, do menial things that sometimes spiritual teachers ask you to do just to be around them. And I was sweeping the floor, and during one of the breaks, and he said, here, come into my office. He was a real character and jokester, because he didn't have an office there. So we went into this little room, and he said, give me your hands. And he put my hands in his hands, and he squeezed. He goes, there, you got it. And I said, what are you talking about? And then he said, oh, nope, give me your hands again. And then he squeezed, and he said, oh, there, you got it. And I tried to ask him what he meant, but something he said to me a lot is, you don't need to know that. And I noticed after that, my intention and my ability to use the heat in my hands and the heat in my hands increased. So that was kind of a mystical. So a lot of the information you get, even we're talking here, and as we've said, there's no way to describe it. So it's like you get the spirit of the message, and it comes in, and you don't know exactly even what it is, but it's something. And there's, your heart opens up, and this joy comes in. It's like, oh, that's it. But then someone would say, what is it? You go, well, it's the joy in my heart. Beyond that, I don't know how to describe it. It's like I just start to feel this energy pulling me up. So the big revelation that I had recently was I had to let go of the vision and the word part even more than I was before. Because I even had like a way to do that, and I would imagine this beautiful place. But, and I've kind of known this in my mind for a long time, but our images limit it. So I was not able to use that image that I kind of generate to go, and it was start to kind of hold me back. And so I don't have an image for the new level. So, and I don't know if I'm going to get to do that, because there's a lot of letting go. But it is, I close my eyes. And there's, on my YouTube channel, I have the basic soul meditation that is designed to help people do that and learn how to do that. So there's some, you could focus on your third eye, you could focus on your heart. There's some chanting in there, and then listening, because a lot of times this energy that's pulling you, there's a sound to it, and you can just go into the sound, and it just kind of, lifts you up. Well, some people call it the sound current. In the Sufi tradition that you chant, and the meditation I have there is to chant Hu, H-U, and it's kind of pronounced in between Y-O-U and H-U-E. But I really like the Sufi explanation of it, which is, in the Islamic religion, they have the 99 names of God. And there are many more. Like some people say there's 1,800, but these are the different qualities of God, and people take those names, and it's one could be like loving and caring and these positive attributes that people have, and it becomes their name, and that's their main expression, I guess, or one of their main expressions. So the U sound is like putting all those names together. So these 1,800 names and these qualities, so it's like all the qualities and all the positive attributes of God. And then the next thing is you try to hear that in everything. You hear, and it's kind of easy in nice sounds, like, on a beautiful summer day, you hear the leaves rustling, it's kind of easy. The tricky part is to hear it, when people are saying things you don't want to hear. I have a teenage daughter who sometimes is acting out, and so I keep reminding myself, can I hear that within her? And, that's a good example, because a lot of times she's getting emotionally upset and she's releasing stuff. And something in me is feeling, it's hurting me, but can I shift to go, well, I'm going to try to listen for that sound in there. And sometimes I can. Something I do, I use colors a lot, so there's that frequency of the colors. It's kind of cool because sometimes the color comes in, sometimes I choose a color to use, but sometimes the color just comes in, and I have experiences, I see the color fill up the room where I am, and the person goes, whoa, that room just filled up with purple. Or a lot of times it's purple, sometimes it's green. So green is more for physical healing, the purple and blue. Blue is like spiritual and mental, purple is like purely for spiritual. So there are different levels of healing. I tell people your mind can help, but it's not the end-all answer. And I joke around, if it was, we could close our eyes and imagine $1 million, and you'd open your eyes and it would be there. There's kind of two sides to that coin, and sometimes people believe it so much. So it's like there might be a path, and their belief exists. And even though all the words I'm using would describe it, their healing is on this path. So it's hard to get their mind over here. Sometimes people who don't believe in what I do at all, I mean, a few people had incredible experiences, and they're just, I'm here because my friend forced me to. So one time I had an office in Connecticut, and my client was this kid like in his early 20s, and I knew him and his father, but so his father was a little suspicious of what I did, even though, we could get along and stuff. So he came to one of the sessions to see what was going on. And, I usually say like a prayer in the beginning to call in the light, and I did. And the room filled up with green light, and he saw it. He's an engineer, and he's like looking for, there was big glass windows there. He said, the light's coming in. Then he said, no, but the sun's shining over there, not over here. So he spent like 15 minutes trying to see what made the room turn green. At the end, he gave up and just said, I don't know what you do, but I feel really good. And he was paying for his son's session, so he continued to pay. But he didn't believe in it at all, and he had that cool experience. Another one really cool, I was actually in the mall, Monmouth Mall in New Jersey, and one of my clients who was very sick called and kind of panicking. And I sat down, and it was funny because the mall seemed to be going out of business, really. Like, it was surprisingly not that many people there on a weekend. And I just sat down and I called in the light, and it filled up with purple light. And she said, and she was in upstate New York, said it filled with purple light. And it was like, wow, it was just really cool. The thing I noticed after that was all of a sudden, shortly after that, the mall became way more crowded. And it seemed like after that it went back, it seemed to be going downhill and started flourishing. I work with people all over the world. To me, even something that's even an extra layer of coolness on the distance is sometimes people are in a time zone where it's a different day than it is here. And that's just like, I don't know, for some reason I love sci-fi. It's like, time travel. It is like when I do what I do, and I don't always close my eyes, but sometimes I do, it is like I'm right there with the person, and they feel it. They physically feel, warm or tingly, or people will always say, oh, I feel so much lighter, and sometimes, oh, I'm feeling something moving in my chest, or stuff like that. So, people say there's no time and distance in the spirit. That's as good of an explanation as anything. There's something so cool about it, right? That's all I love it. I mean, it is, there's, yeah, I have clients in Europe and, Eastern Asia and all that stuff too. So it is really cool. My degree is in spiritual science, and a big part of the schooling was to try to find make it a scientific method. Like for 6 years, I had to track pretty much everything I did. From you wake up, you write down the time. We had to take the pH of our urine first thing in the morning, when you go to sleep, how much you meditate, exercise, water, and there were a lot of other things. And then trying to come up with, if you meditate 27 minutes a day, then this happens, by keeping track of it and using the scientific method, which it was good. I cheated a lot, because if I'm tracking how much I meditate, I tend to meditate more. It was a great experience, and I ended up learning a real lot. So I ended up writing my paper years after the schooling about a breathing exercise that I kind of developed over the years. And it was, again, something is guiding me to do this, and it is beyond me, because it took me a long time, and for some years I would sit down once a week and write, and I just never got that enthusiastic about it. And then I would, and my enthusiasm would go away. And I said to myself, if I want to write this paper, I'm going to have to get through that. And just, if I want to get my degree, and I've said to myself, I'm going to just make it about breathing, because it'd be really easy. And I kind of felt like I was kind of cheating the system a little bit, but we had to go back and reference it to the school, and almost, at least once a month, if not more, in my notes and my journaling and the questions we had to answer, it would say, breathing is the most important way that I take care of myself. So then it was like, wow, I wasn't, so I don't know. It's not like I put that together, like something in me, my intuition or my inner master, whatever we're talking about, directed me towards doing that, and it ended up being a profound experience. It's cool. So I call it a soul travel as opposed to astral travel or projection. I think some of it is the purpose is to connect into the spirit, as opposed to trying to connect to something physically. So even when I'm working with people, there's some of it where I look right at them energetically, but a lot of times, and I sometimes have to remind myself of this, because my human part wants to go there and fix them. And it's like, no, look and see what's happening in the spirit. We're there, spiritual aspects are up there. So yes, I do that meditation pretty much every day, and sometimes I find myself out of my body. Some days it's a bit of a struggle, and I check my phone 300 times instead of doing it. But yes, that's kind of the purpose of it. When like I said, when I'm working with people, it is like I'm right there with them. So that happens all the time. Sometimes, like, the spirit comes in and it's almost like this pressure on you, and sometimes it can be kind of on your ears, and all of a sudden it goes, and then it's like there's no sound. Sometimes you just feel pressure. Like some people say they're kind of paralyzed, so sometimes that happens where, to me, I can always, if I really focus, I can move my arms, but sometimes it is like the spirit comes and it's pressing, and it feels like I can't move my arm, but then I can if I really try to. It's good to look at those things and see what it might mean or stuff like that. And then, but the important part is to do that and then put that information back and see. There's more like get the energy moving. So the purpose for me of getting the information is, can it open up to more energy? Can it open up to more healing? And so sometimes using that information, then you just get caught up in the mind. And then other times, like, oh, there's that key, and it is kind of like unlocking a lock, and then more energy comes in. I definitely get visions of all sorts of things. And in what I do, people say, how do you know it's not in your head? In one way, it doesn't really matter. If it helps the person, I definitely see visions from other lifetimes with people, and I know that it is, but it doesn't matter whether it is. If it helps the person feel better, to do better things in the world, to be healthy by clearing those things from those images, that is a good thing. So I just stay focused on that. It's good to be silly. So it is, but we do use our imagination to kind of start these things. There is the part of kind of starting it and letting go, starting it and letting go, and asking for healing, but being willing to let that go. Again, there's so many ways to look at what it is and how to describe it, and it's good. It's fun to talk about it. There's something intellectually stimulating about it, like, is that really what it is? Or, and it helps. Even talking about my near-death experience, there's just layer upon layer upon layer of knowing, and mine was 40 years ago, and like I said, about a month ago, I had this revelation, like, wow, I was being shown how to meditate perfectly during my near-death experience, and I still haven't gotten there now, all these years later, but I took a whole nother big step in that direction. So it is using our curiosity, and it's way better than using your curiosity to do these negative things and run all these negative thoughts through your head. I mean, those two were teachers on the physical level and are teachers in spirit now. So we're talking kind of levels. So there's the astral, causal, mental, etheric, and then the soul levels. And the soul levels is where I try to connect, because it's a high, purely spiritual level. The part of it that's sometimes a little frustrating is in these lower levels, and they're spiritual, but they're lower spiritual levels. There's more of a reference to the physical level, and then up here. So to me, I talk to people about that stuff. So sometimes I'm working and these beings come in, I mean all the time, but sometimes it would be like Jesus or Buddha, something, but each of them is almost like a way to help people do what they do. So Jesus covers the most amount of people on the planet, but some people that's not who it's for, like Buddha, Abraham and the Jewish religion, Muhammad, Allah, all these beings are there in spirit. The archangels, there's all sorts of angels that are there to help us. We got to let go of that needing of an image or a word for the reference there. And then, there's things like divas that are in plants and that can help us. There's so many different beings in spirit. So everything on the physical level has something corresponding in the spirit. When working with people, I want to try to find the terms they can relate to, and that's kind of important, because you don't want people turned off or shutting down because sometimes people are born in a religion, they're very attached to it. Some people are born in a religion, they're kind of against that religion. So you just I try to get a feel for where they're at and use the words that work for them. I think that's important. And don't be judgmental about different paths to God. I think that's super important. Some of the books that I read when I was starting out, one was Autobiography of a Yogi, that I felt really helpful. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior was really helpful. Some of the Herman Hesse books, those are fictional, but there's a lot of cool spiritual stuff in there. And the Sufi I studied with, his name is Rashad Field. And the first two books he read are in story form. He wrote other books that are more specific, but the story books I find, one was called The Last Barrier, and the other one's called The Invisible Way. Those are two books that are, to me, I think when it's in story form, and Autobiography of a Yogi is a story, same with the Peaceful Warrior. I don't know, it just allows my personal path to come present without trying to narrow it down in a certain way. So those are books that really had a big impact on me. Well, if anyone's interested, I have on my YouTube channel, I have a video about the breathing thing I developed, and I kind of made a modified version of my treatise book for people to read without all the stuff that the school needed that would be on people. So if anyone wants that booklet, you can get in touch with me and I'll send it to you. Sometimes I do dream work, and sometimes I don't, because I just want to sleep. And so I was having these very real dreams that I was able to kind of have some control over. And it was some years ago when Israel and Palestine were really fighting, and I had this dream that I was up on this ledge and I could see them fighting down here. And I said to myself, well, call in the light. And I called in the light, and this light went whoosh. And then I woke up the next day, and in the paper, Israel and Palestine came to a peace agreement. And I know it hasn't lasted, but that was something really cool, And I don't know if I was seeing what was going to happen or had something to do with it, but it's a good story. That's what you have to do with spiritual stuff. You got to keep letting go of that preconceived idea so you can let in the wisdom that's coming in at that moment. If you think you know it, then that's from the past, so we want to be in the present. Yeah, and it gives permission to open up and own that very valuable, important part of ourselves. I think that's why I like to do it, and it gives me more permission each time I talk about it. Like, oh wow, that is really cool, and it's just great to connect. It's great. Yeah.